Hello again and welcome to another session with the Cyber Professor. Today we will be talking about how to join a server to an existing Active Directory domain that we have created prior to the recording of this video. So the virtual lab that we have set up for us is as follows. We have a box that is named DC1 for domain controller 1. This server is running Windows Server 2012 R2. The IP address that we have assigned is 10.0.0.2. It has been a static assignment of an IP. The subnet mask is 255.0.0.0. The default gateway is 10.0.0.1. And the DNS server is 127.0.0.1, pointing to itself, because on this server, that is DC1, we have already deployed Active Directory domain services to make it a domain controller and to create a domain. And we also have set up or installed the role of DHCP and DNS server on this box. So DC1 is our domain controller, is our DNS server, and it is also our DHCP server for the purposes of this lab. Now, we also have another box that we have installed, and that is FS1 for File Server 1. This second box that is on the right is a Windows Server 2012 R2. It has an IP address that it has also been assigned statically with the settings of 10.0.0.3, and the subnet mask is the same as the one for DC1, 255.0.0.0, and the gateway, the default gateway is 10.0.0.1, and DNS server, the DNS server for this box is 10.0.0.2, which is pointing to DC1 as its DNS server. Domain information, so just for background purposes, so you understand what we have done prior to the recording of this video. When we added the role of Active Directory domain services to DC1 and we promoted this server as the domain controller for our domain, we created this domain under these settings. The root domain name is cyberlab.com. The directory services restore mode or DSRM password is cyberlab with the 3 and the @ symbol mixed into the password, and C is an uppercase C. The forest functional level and the domain functional level for this domain is Windows Server 2012 R2, and the NetBIOS name is cyberlab, all in lowercase. We went with the defaults for the location of the database, the log, and the sysvol folders for our domain, so we didn't make any changes to those settings. So now that we have presented the way that we have created our virtual lab, let me move to the actual VMs that are running on our system. We are using Oracle VirtualBox as the hypervisor type 2 that is installed on our Windows 10 system. And this Oracle VirtualBox has been used to create the two virtual machines that were depicted in the previous diagram with the names of DC1 and FS1. So this box right here to the left is DC1, as you can tell, because of the computer name that is coming up under Server Manager. We already see that the domain for this box is cyberlab.com, which is again matching the previous settings that we displayed for you. The IP address, make sure that you pay attention to this detail because you don't see DHCP listed here under Ethernet. It has been assigned statically, so we needed to manually assign this IP address with all the other settings that I presented earlier a few minutes ago. So 10.0.0.2 is the IPv4 version 4 address of this box. You see that the roles of Active Directory domain services, DHCP, and DNS have already been added to this box, so that is proof that what we presented in the previous slide is actually already installed on this box to the left. This is the virtual machine that is running on the left, and it is DC1. Now on the right we have a second virtual machine that is the computer name is FS1 as listed here, and you can tell that it is not joined to any domain because it is still part of a workgroup, And you see that by this setting right here, or this entry right here that says workgroup, and the name of the workgroup is workgroup. This is the default setting that any box or any server that you install under VirtualBox will have, because it hasn't been joined to a domain yet, to an Active Directory domain yet. So you see that the IP address under the Ethernet has been already modified from the default. We assign a static IP address as mentioned earlier, and the IP address that we assign is 10.0.0.3. All the other settings were presented in the slide that I showed you at the beginning of the video. So now what we want to do is we want to join this second server, the one that I am pointing at on the right, to the Active Directory domain that we have already created under the name of cyberlab.com. So the way to do it is we click on this setting workgroup, but before we do that, let me just make sure that I show you one more thing. If you take a look at Oracle VirtualBox, which is the hypervisor that you're running, just make sure that you right click on the settings for the two servers that you have created and you're using for this lab that you are conducting. Go under settings and then go under network, and make sure that the network adapter that you have installed for this server is set up as a bridge adapter. So then you click on OK and you will be fine. Do the same for the second server that you have running Windows Server 2012. Go under network and make sure that you have bridge adapter installed. The reason being, we want to make sure the communication is wide open between these two virtual machines that we have created, and we do not want to run into any networking issues for the purposes of the lab. Now, should this be the right setup if you were running a real environment? Of course not, but this is for demonstration purposes, so we can have a better understanding of how to join the second box, the FS1 server, to the Active Directory domain by the name of cyberlab.com. So we stop right here. We were about to click on workgroup. We are going to do that now. This window will come up, the system properties window, that allows for us to make a couple of changes. One, we can change the computer name, and two, we can change the workgroup name that is assigned to this server. For the computer name, we don't have to worry about it because we already changed this prior to the recording of this video to FS1 to come up with a name that is closely aligned with the purposes of this server down the road, which is a file server. So that is why we have FS1 for file server number 1. And the domain is the only setting that we need to modify here. So under domain, we are going to use the name that we have created for our domain, which is cyberlab.com, which is again on the left side of the screen that I am pointing at. So we are going to enter that same name here. So we are going to do cyberlab.com, and then we click on OK. And now it is asking us for the authentication of the user that is trying to join this server to the domain. Of course, Windows wants to make sure that not anyone and everyone is able to connect computers to an existing domain. So it's asking for credentials of the user that is trying to conduct these activities on the server. So for our case, we are going to use administrator, and we are going to use for password, the password that we set up for the administrator account on our domain. And we are going to click on OK. Now, the system is going to verify our credentials. Of course, we were typing the right password and the right username. So now we are being welcomed to the cyberlab.com domain. We click on OK. We click on OK because the system is going to restart to make sure that from the previous settings of workgroup, now the new setting will be a domain joined server, and the exact name of the domain that we are joining is cyberlab.com. So we are going to click on OK here, and we are going to close here, and we are going to restart now. We wait a few seconds for the server to restart, and then we are going to be verifying that this second server that we have set up running Windows Server 2012 R2 is actually joined to the cyberlab.com domain, which was our initial intent for the purposes of this demonstration. So let us wait a few seconds, and we are going to be ready to go. So we are going to do the Control-Alt-Delete on the second server. Now you can see that we are going to use the administrator account again. And now let us wait for Server Manager to open up and verify that we are actually joined to the cyberlab.com domain. So we click on local server, we wait a few seconds, and voila. So you can see that the computer name is FS1. We didn't change that setting for this server, but now you can see that instead of workgroup, you see domain listed here as the second entry for your properties for the local server. And you can see that cyberlab.com is the domain that has been used for this particular server. So we are joining the cyberlab.com domain. You can see our IP address setting has been kept. So we are actually in good shape. So now we have the same networking environment as far as the IP connectivity at the layer 3 level of the OSI model, but at the same time we have the domain that we have joined, which is cyberlab.com. So we can now talk to each other. These two servers can talk to each other because they are on the same domain. And this will be the setup that we are going to use for some of the activities that we will be conducting along the way, as far as other setups that we need to complete, including the adding of the distributed file system role to these two servers, DFS. And then we are going to also work on the file server resource manager, or FSRM, role that we need to add on these servers. So this is the basic setup that I need you to complete. Hopefully this has been helpful. And with that, thank you very much.